The over-under win total for South Carolina in 2021 was 4. Folks, they won 7. Also, they did it with a revolving door at quarterback. Just about anybody and everybody who suited up for South Carolina was able to play quarterback and was able to, in the bowl game, they played a receiver at quarterback. And Shane Beamer is saying, man, we wish we had played him a lot sooner because Dak Joyner did a really good job for us in the bowl game. But all that's to say, there was a lot of things that South Carolina did a year ago that nobody saw coming. And so the narrative has changed a little bit about South Carolina. A lot of people see them as a team that could build on that. Now in 2022, the over-under is at 5.5 games. And so I think we need to have a conversation right now about, hey, what can you expect? What should you expect? What's reasonable to expect from South Carolina in 2022? So we're going to go with some bad news, some good news, and then I'm going to give you my ultimate take as it pertains to their record in 2022 and beyond. So the bad news is for South Carolina, a lot of the games that you won last year were games that sort of broke your way. I mean, they were about a score, a little bit more than that in some of these games with teams that you really shouldn't have been messing around with as an SEC program. As truthfully the brand that is South Carolina, you shouldn't have had to take as much effort as you did. Go down the list here. They beat Eastern Carolina by 3. That is no disrespect to the Pirates. But if you're South Carolina, you should take care of business against ECU by 2 touchdowns. I know the quarterback situation was in disarray. Like they played a GA at one point. But still, we got to take care of business against who we're supposed to take care of business against. Then they beat Troy by 9. Better, but again, it's Troy. I'm not trying to disrespect Troy. I'm just saying South Carolina, if you are not taking a leap forward in terms of talent and production and identity, we got problems. We can't play Troy close. We can't play Eastern Carolina close. They beat Vanderbilt by 1. Vanderbilt, also an SEC program. Clark Lee's got them headed the right direction. I'm a Clark Lee guy. I'm a Clark Lee believer. I think somebody actually at SEC Media Day gave them a vote for first place. I love it. Let's go. Doors roll. Doors, you're right down the street from us. But South Carolina, to sing the same song, third verse, should be able to beat Vanderbilt by more. And so the reason why this is bad news, in my opinion, is because some of these games, like I said, if they break your way one year, you can't just depend on them to break your way the next year. Like you need to take steps to beat Vanderbilt by more than 1 point this upcoming year, right? Like it has to be a jump in terms of what they do on the field. Okay? So ultimately, I'm not trying to talk about just whenever they play Vanderbilt specifically. I'm talking about taking a leap in terms of performance from what they were a year ago. In addition to that, it's kind of a bad news, good news, but we'll keep it in the bad news section. 24 takeaways a year ago on defense for South Carolina. Guys, that is really, really good. That was best in the SEC. Similar to how I feel about those 3 games where you kind of play with your food against lesser competition, you can't really depend on having 24 turnovers. Now, it's a good sign in terms of what you're able to do on defense and be opportunistic and capitalize when you were supposed to capitalize or able to capitalize. That's a good thing. But when you're playing defense hoping you can make a takeaway, or when you're depending on takeaways, I should say rather, that's when you run into trouble. Because takeaways, in some regard, I want to be careful how I say this, it's not always exclusively a defensive effort to have takeaways. Some of that is, hey, it was a tip pass off the receiver's hands, ball's in the air, it's our ball. Some of it is hey, receiver ran the wrong route and he threw it to us. Some of it is a bad snap. Okay, we're on the ball. So you see what I'm saying here? Some of this is a two-sided effort in terms of getting takeaways because South Carolina has their own problems on defense stopping the run. They gave up just around 175 yards per game on the ground. You got to be better, especially in the SEC. Shane Beamer has said it. The great teams in college football, yes, but especially in this conference, win the trenches. Georgia, Alabama, LSU when they're playing great, Auburn when they were great with Nick Fairley. You got to win the trenches in college football, especially in the SEC. There's too many freak shows running around there to have a lackluster performance in those trenches. You got to be better. And they've done a lot in the portal to try and revamp that. They've done a lot this offseason to try and revamp that, but you got to take a step forward because you can't play with your food in terms of lesser competition. You can't bank on turnovers. You can play great defense, but you can't bank on turnovers in 2022. And you certainly have to play better against the run. These are all things that South Carolina knows. The ultimate point I'm trying to make here is there were things, again, that broke South Carolina's way last year that you can't depend on this year. Okay? I'm just saying, luck is fickle and not something that you can ultimately train in the offseason. Okay? So now if you practice well and you focus on the right things, you get lucky more frequently. But again, it's not something that you can continue to go to the well for. So in terms of good news, let's talk about some good news for South Carolina. The good news is their roster will be better. They added 9 transfers, 9 good transfers in my opinion. You got Spencer Rattler playing quarterback. We'll touch on more in a minute. You got Christian Beal-Smith going to add another level of toughness and downhill running to that running back room behind Marshawn Lloyd. You also added Austin Stogner, a guy from Oklahoma that is a Shane Beamer kind of guy who Shane Beamer coached at OU. Then you added Juice Wells, who I think is going to be someone to really, really watch because he was a baller, transferred up. He was at JMU. He has the potential to be a number 1 receiver kind of guy. Now, Josh Vann probably has that taken care of, but to have 2 guys that can help you in the pass game, that is huge. Also sounds like Juice Wells and Spencer Rattler have gelled early on. More good news, okay? So ultimately, the roster from a year ago is improved, not just because they got more time under the staff, they're taking more steps in the process to get to where they want to be, but based on the transfer portal, they were able to add some real talent. And folks, that is a very good thing. Some more good news, you have stability at quarterback. Like we talked about, Spencer Rattler was this time a year ago going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. He's going to win the Heisman Trophy, and he was going to lead Oklahoma to the playoff. None of those things happened, but it still remains that Spencer Rattler is an enormously talented individual. And if you look at what South Carolina had in that quarterback room a year ago, it was a revolving door, like we talked about. There was someone playing quarterback. It felt like that was different the week before every week for South Carolina. And they still won 7 games. You won 7 games playing a wide receiver and a GA at quarterback, okay? So all that's to say, they will have someone who can play quarterback for them in South Carolina, which is a reason for all the optimism they have down there in Columbia. Spencer Rattler alone, they're saying, okay, we won 7 games with a partridge in a pear tree and everybody else who was in Columbia playing quarterback, right? I mean, we had no consistency. Still won 7 games. Imagine if we have somebody back there as talented as Spencer Rattler. We throw him into the mix, just sort of copy-paste. How good can we be? How good can we be? And that's the reason why there's so much excitement. They haven't had a quarterback like Spencer Rattler there since, let's say, Connor Shaw. Well, yeah, Connor Shaw is probably a fair comparison to make. They have someone who is going to be dependable and someone who has, just from a talent perspective, a really, really high ceiling. Now, you know how I feel about this. I think they have to make sure they manage him effectively. I think they have to make sure that he isn't having to feel like he's Superman every single week, every single game. But if they can manage him well and just simplify it for him, I believe in Marcus Satterfield. Got to spend some time around him when I was at Baylor. If they can simplify it like I think they will be able to, Spencer Rattler will have a really great 2022. Now, if they put too much on him, if he puts too much on himself, if he just wants to make poor decisions, well, then you're back to square one for South Carolina, and maybe you got to ask someone else to play quarterback. That's probably not the case, but you hear what I'm saying here. Spencer Rattler can be his own worst enemy, but from a talent perspective, he's the reason for a lot of hype in Columbia right now. So another side of this is Spencer Rattler is actually, in some way, shape, or form, going to be a recruiting tool for South Carolina. If he goes out there and plays really well, well, then Shane Beamer can go to a number of quarterbacks in future classes and say, hey, you want to come here and be the next Spencer Rattler? He came to us from Oklahoma. He was benched. He was looking for a revamp for his career. Came to South Carolina, lit it up. Dude was an All-American. We won 9 games, whatever it is. You want to come here and do that? It's been done before. I think you're a pretty talented kid. Why don't you come here and do that for us, South Carolina? Because Shane Beamer right now doesn't have that signal fire, doesn't have that blueprint laid out just yet that he can recruit with. Spencer Rattler would be a really great recruiting tool as they move forward. So something to watch for. I think that's kind of an underlying story that we need to keep an eye on as we watch this whole process unfold. So here's my take on this. Here's my ultimate feel on what you need to think about with South Carolina for expectations. Talked about it, the over-under for them in 2022 is 5.5 games. They're going to win more than 5 games, folks. They will be a 6-win team at minimum. What I think we need to make sure we talk about is if they don't, the sky is not falling in Columbia, right? I mean, there is nothing to be concerned about if they win 5 games, 6 games, because like I said, some of these games break a different way. Shane Beamer is in his 2nd year in Columbia. It's his 2nd season as a head coach. He's still figuring it out too. He's still getting his feet under him too. And so you have to understand this is something that's probably going to take some time to ultimately reach its pinnacle of success, to reach its high point of what it's going to be at one point or another. I love Shane Beamer. I am as transparent as possible with this. Shane Beamer is our kind of guy here on the Hard Count. Cares about the right things, is an inside-out kind of guy when it comes to his program, meaning he keeps everything in-house and they don't let the external affect them. I mean, he is a guy that we very much so stand by on this show. I wish nothing but the best for him. I mean, you could keep going. High energy, a player's coach, takes a bath in mayo. I love everything about Shane Beamer. It's going to take some time. It's not a ready-made situation. They did a lot to get transfers via the portal, but it may take a 2.5 at South Carolina to get to where they ultimately can go. So, again, I'm buying the over of the 5.5 wins. I'm taking that to the bank. But if for some reason it's not 7 games or it's not 8 games, if it's 5 or 6 games, give it some time. Take a chill pill. Understand this is going to take a minute to get settled and be excited because you got a really great head coach in the seat at South Carolina. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.